And there you have it. This case has concluded with Judge Timothy Walmsley, presiding judge in the trial of the men convicted of murdering Ahmaud Arbery in a searching and careful and sometimes almost philosophical sentencing of the three men who murdered the young black man who was simply out for a run in the Saltillo Shores neighborhood in Brunswick County, Georgia. And in this sentencing, what you heard was the judge not just impose punishment. Travis McMichael, who was the shooter in this case, he was the one who shot Ahmaud Arbery, sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In addition, a sentence of 20 consecutive years, just to make sure. His father, Gregory McMichael, who started this incident when he saw Ahmaud Arbery running through the neighborhood and thought maybe perhaps he was linked to some petty crimes that were happening and said, let's go. He also got a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole plus 20 years. And then William Roddie Bryan, who is the neighbor who joined in the chase and in his pickup truck helped corner Ahmaud Arbery in the moments before his death. He received a sentence of life, but with the possibility of parole after 30 years, and then another 10 years consecutive to that. So all these men are likely, certainly the McMichaels, will die in prison under Georgia unless there is clemency granted by the governor at some point. A very serious sentencing, but also, as I say, somewhat philosophical. And so let's bring back in C.K. Hoffler, trial attorney, former president of the National Bar Association, and former homicide prosecutor Bernardo Villalona, and managing partner at the Cochran firm, and ABC News contributor Shauna Lloyd, and ABC's senior national correspondent Steve Osunsami. Steve, you've covered this case from the beginning, if I can begin with you. And Judge Walmsley struck me as someone who is looking for meaning and looking for lessons within the context of his role as a judge. He wasn't preaching up there, but he did say something that struck me, that this whole case, which he described as a tragedy, that maybe the lesson of it is that our definition of who counts as a neighbor to us, it needs to be more than just the people who might own property around us. And he went on. What was your impression of the judge here?
I thought it was a really powerful statement. Frankly, I wasn't expecting it. You know, he's been pretty even-handed throughout this case, and there are some people who would feel that, you know, he sort of made rulings that sometimes favored the defense. And what he made clear is that, you know, the idea that a black man in Georgia has to stop because a white man with a gun tells him to is not neighborly, is not right, especially if there's a death involved, if someone is killed. There were a couple things he said that struck me. One of them was the way that he said in one of the freeze frames that you saw Travis McMichael with the gun pointing it at Ahmaud Arbery. And then the other thing he said that really struck me was the picture in the video, and I'm not sure if this was the cell phone video or the police body camera, where you see Ahmaud Arbery dying in the street, and you see Travis McMichael and his father, Gregory McMichael, walking away from him with their backs turned towards the body, not trying to help him at all. You know, there are a lot of people, I will tell you, Terry, in this state who still believe that these men did nothing wrong. They look at this through a different prism. You hear people say that if Ahmaud Arbery had only stopped, that he would still be alive. What the judge said today, the point you mentioned about being and acting like a good neighbor, is that that's not the prism that this should be looked at through. That what happened here was a murder. What happened here was a tragedy. And while these sentences won't bring this young man back, they underline the justice that was deserved in this case. Terry?
It was just about the maximum penalty that these defendants could receive, with the exception there of William Roddie Bryan, who joined in and does have an opportunity of parole after decades behind bars under Georgia law. Bernardo Villalona, let me go to you on something else the judge said. First, your sense of the sentences themselves, but also the judge talked about closure. He says very difficult, people talk about it, but really it means something different for each and every person. And so he said with almost modesty given what the courts can and cannot accomplish. He said instead of closure, maybe we can see today as an exercise in accountability. We are all accountable for our own actions, and that today the defendants are being held accountable for theirs, and that it was accountability that was achieved here, not closure. I know you've prosecuted cases representing, now you represent the people of the state of New York, but also the victims, the families of those who have been killed. Does that sound right to you?
Absolutely. Judge Walmsley today, he sent a message when he sentenced Greg and Travis McMichael, as well as William Roddie Bryan. And he sent a message of one of peace, one of that this didn't have to happen, one of embracing each other. But more importantly, also, he emphasized in regards to closure, it's a different definition for people. Same thing as justice is a different definition for people. But the one definition that does not change is the one of accountability. And when we talk about accountability, he said about holding them accountable for the actions they took on that day, each one of the defendants. But I also wanted to point out the emphasis that he made in standing quietly for 1 minute to try to put everyone in the shoes of Ahmaud Arbery. That was just 1 minute. So just imagine this man running for 5 minutes with the terror in his head about what is about to happen. I really appreciate and respect Judge Walmsley for doing that, because he gave us all and forced us all to take that minute to think about Ahmaud Arbery and what he was doing and his thoughts. So he sent the correct message and the right message with the sentence that he gave today.
It was a striking moment, thank you, Bernarda, when we all sat silently and just could feel a distant, tiny echo of what it must have been like for that young man during 5 minutes of being chased to what ended up being his death. And CK, this case has meant so much to this community and to our country, the specter of what it represents, given our country's history of white men chasing down black men and doing violence and killing them. It felt like the judge had that history perhaps appropriately in mind and in his heart as well in imposing this sentence.
I agree. I think he did. I think the judge was very deliberate. He was very intentional about each and every word that he used. His words were powerful. He took the time to place us in Ahmaud Arbery's shoes. We haven't had that experience much in this case. And he also took the time to pull quotes, direct quotes from each of the defendants. That was very powerful. Quite frankly, I felt like he was being a plaintiff's attorney. Not that he, and I only say that jokingly, that 1 minute of silence is something that sometimes we see in a courtroom, particularly in civil cases, because it does give us a sense of, oh my goodness, what could have Ahmaud Arbery been thinking? The terror, the horror, the fear in his heart. He didn't say a single word, and he brought all that to the forefront. So I think the judge spoke. Justice has been served. While I think that I may have some kind of view on Mr. Bryan and I think he should have also been sentenced without parole. I think he's going to be in jail for long enough that I think justice was served on him too, but definitely for the McMichaels. And I think the judge did give some credence to the notion that a father directed his son. He started this and got his son all wound up in some respects, that the father should have been more responsible for his child, for his son. So now after the fact, asking for leniency and asking for the court to not penalize him was disingenuous, to say the least. And so I think the judge got that. He conveyed his message in a very persuasive way without shoving it down your throat. And again, justice was served.
It did seem he was judicious, but very, very strong. And thank you for that, CK. One of the thoughts that occurred to me is how many victims there are in a crime like this. Travis McMichael, who now goes to prison for the rest of his life, had an infant child that he was caring for when he left to go kill Ahmaud Arbery, which ended to chase down and eventually kill Ahmaud Arbery. That child will never know her father outside of a prison setting. And Shauna Lloyd, I'd like to go to you on, look, we're covering this case because of its social significance, but people do tune in, and they listen and they learn a little bit about the operation of law, that intersection of the reasons we care about cases like this, these important social and cultural issues, and how the law deals with them. What do you think people got from listening to Judge Walmsley and understanding his sentence in this case?
I think what you get from Judge Walmsley is that the sentence that he imposed was equal to the crime that happened. What he saw and what the jury saw was a complete travesty. What they saw was that these individuals with a malignant heart went after this young man and caused his death. They have now created a situation by which they are on trial for those particular actions. And what he did was he very much showed us how our actions can lead to these type of penalties and these types of situations. He has showed us that we have to be much more cognizant as the way we interact with others to ensure that we are doing right by one another. So that way you don't end up in a situation where these type of decisions lead to these types of consequences. And I think he was very clear about that level of accountability that this sentence was meant to impose.
Thanks, Shauna. The bedrock morality at the bottom of the law, that you must be accountable for the crimes that you commit. And Bernardo, let me go back to you on something I mentioned. You've been a veteran homicide prosecutor. You represent formally Bernardo has dropped, so I'll go back to CK on this question. The question of, for the family, of course, the prosecution in this case representing the people of the state of Georgia, that is the way the case is styled and named, and that the community is exercising its justice through the court system in this case. But the family is there. And does this, can you imagine what impact a sentence like this, seeing the justice done as the way it was in this case, does that help at all, do you think?
Well, I do think, Ahmaud Arbery's mother said that she felt that there would be some closure. So for her, just getting to this day and hearing that both McMichaels are sentenced for life without the opportunity of parole, probably in some way, based on her words, will give her closure. But her suffering will continue because she will never have her child. She'll never be able to hug her child and experience what she would have ordinarily experienced, but for the heinous crimes of these defendants. So I think for the family, especially with the sentencing of the McMichaels, this is a sense of vindication. It's bittersweet. You know, I felt like I was, when I was listening to Lee Merritt and to Ben Crump and to, Barbara Arnwine, Daryl Jones from Transformative Justice Coalition. This is a National Bar Association reunion. All of them are very, very honorable and have served the National Bar tremendously in representing just this family and other families. For the faith community to be there as well, surrounding Ahmaud Arbery's family, to help them through this tragedy, despite the sentencing, because again, at the end of the day, even though there's justice, they will never have their child. It's so important. So it was comforting for me to see that the faith community is there, the social justice community is there, Transformative Justice Coalition, Rainbow Push Coalition, and that you have the Ben Crump and the Lee Merritt there who have been with this family from the beginning, representing them, supporting them, and giving them the tools to deal with the judicial system, because now they have to pick up the pieces. And let's not forget, there's another trial. There's the hate crime trial, and I think the evidence in that case is going to slant more towards the racial animus and related issues that we have seen and heard of and know exist. I've seen some of the evidence in that case. So I think this is probably a healing moment for the family.
Thank you, CK. And the judge did mention that it was appropriate in the sentencing phase to recognize that there had been racist texts between the defendants, between Travis and Greg McMichael, and that could be relevant in sentencing. Shauna, let me come to you finally on something CK was talking about, which is the way the community, the Black American community, faith community, social justice leaders, lawyers with the National Bar Association have come to help the family. And I can't help but thinking, the decades, the centuries of work that has been done in that way with so many black families who have over the course of our history stood where the Arbery's stand. with their loved one having been taken from them in an act of violence with racial components. We've been seeing some of these trials this year. Obviously, the George Floyd trial, paramount in that. Do verdicts like this, and the one in the trial of Derek Chauvin, the officer who killed George Floyd, and the sentences that bring to bear the morality that's in the law, does it help the overall situation, the deep, abiding problem in our country about power and violence against black men, and particularly black people in general? Is this part of the progress, or is it just going to keep going on? What do you think?
You know, Terry, I think that this is part of the progress. I think that what you're seeing now is something that I think black and brown people have been living with and understanding and seeing, that they are unseen by the system, that they don't get the same sort of justice, that they're not heard by the criminal justice system. They're just crushed by it. So I think what we're seeing in these verdicts is a system that is starting to see and acknowledge that they have the same rights, that they are equal under the law, and that the results should be no different no matter what your color is. And I think each one of these verdicts that we're seeing is something that says we are progressing as a society to recognize that these types of actions are not okay. It is not okay for anyone to jump in a car armed and chase anyone down. This was not someone that you knew had done a crime. He did nothing visibly violent or illegal in front of you, and yet you still felt that you had a right. And this is the criminal justice system reminding us that that is not a right that we have. And so each one of those on behalf of black and brown people is a step of progress into the right direction as far as the criminal justice system is in that matter.
Well, let's hope. We'll end on that slightly optimistic note on a somber day, but a day when justice was completed and done in Georgia. C.K. Hoffler and Shauna Lloyd, thanks very much for your contribution today. And just to recap, after the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, both Travis McMichael and Gregory McMichael have now been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And William Roddie Bryan, he's been sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years under Georgia law.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.